when it comes to the Star Wars property and merchandising it, there's one factor that tends to come to the top of the heap, and that's the cuteness factor. If something's in Star Wars and it's cute, well, you probably have a formula for success. I mean, come on, you can't walk into any retailer these days without tripping over tons and tons of Baby Yoda stuff. And yeah, there's a lot of it out there. Why? Well, he's cute. I mean, he's also tied into the heritage of Star Wars and the fact that he's the same species as Yoda. I mean, outside of Yaddle in like one shot in Episode 1, we really haven't seen anyone else from this species. So, it just screams Star Wars. They've basically just taken an existing character and, cutified it by 15%. So, yeah, it's a formula that works and is proven. And that's actually the entire key to what we're going to talk about today. Because, well, just because something's cute doesn't mean it's going to sell. But on paper, in a spreadsheet, when designing properties and designing merchandise, well, it's a big box that gets checked. This was attempted just a few years ago with the new introduction in, The Last Jedi, right? The Porgs. Oh, Chewie and the Porgs. That book isn't going to end well. Yeah, Porgs were everywhere for about a year. They were collector merchandise. They were, in-scale 6-inch Black Series, in their own assortment of one, if you will, that they actually, did 2 different sculpts and put them out. And, you could even buy a giant porg that's big enough to swallow your child whole. Hull? How do you swallow something whole? I guess you can't unless you're on a boat. Yeah, so porgs. They're cute. They've got giant eyes. What can I say? They figured out the formula that if you have big black eyes like a pop, it's going to be cute. But just because something is cute, it doesn't always sell. And this has been something that's come into the Star Wars merchandising area multiple times. The biggest and the original were these guys. You probably know who they are. They're the furry little denizens of the forest moon of Endor. And while they were the original attempt to do cuteness in Star Wars, they weren't the last, and they probably will still not be the last. After all, we have very, shall we say, short memories of Star Wars and the attempt to merchandise cuteness towards us. Originally, back in the 80s, the Ewoks were looked at as purely a merchandising opportunity. Now, when you get Ewok merchandise, it tends to be much more for the adult collector, and after 20, 30 years, we've kind of gotten an appreciation for the Ewoks that we didn't have. When we first saw them, they looked like teddy bears in outer space. They were just, kind of mean Care Bears, if you will, that lived in the forest and, well, tried to eat human beings. Well, honestly, those of us who had feelings of kind of disappointment in the Ewoks, or, I wouldn't call it hatred, but, not exactly falling in love, was directly tied to the fact that it was very much felt like they were put into the movie just to sell merchandise. I mean, we've all seen that scene in Spaceballs. And Ewoks do make great merchandise, or at least they make merchandise. We've seen Ewoks consistently for the last 40 years or so. Now, in the mid-'80s, there was also the advantage of content. When Star Wars ended in the terms of Return of the Jedi in 1983, well, the new content that we got was very Ewok-centric. We had Ewok movies that were released both theatrically and directly on theatrically and then on VHS. Although most of us remember watching them at home. The theatrical run for the Ewok Adventure and the Caravan of Courage was not exactly something that made Hollywood change its attitude. But yeah, we were blessed with a psychotic-looking Wicket and his human friends, and of course there was the animated series. So Ewoks were everywhere. And that really led to, is it just because they're cute? Is it because they have the word Star Wars attached to them? In a lot of ways, yes, it was. It was as simple as that. Now, the animated series wasn't exactly in, continuity with the movies. There were a lot of differences, and obviously the Ewoks spoke English and even dressed differently, and there were new characters. And it's not to say that there weren't movie-related product. Obviously, the Ewoks started with movie-related product. There were more Ewoks, as far as an alien species, in the vintage Kenner line than any other alien species or any other faction. And they had play sets and vehicles and, all sorts of things. Well, it wasn't just limited to the original Kenner line. Kenner even had a preschool line, a second toy line, just about the Ewoks, which was based around the Ewok family hut This was the big box item in part of the planogram that went with the basic figures and the vehicles. So yeah, Ewok started not just one, but multiple toy lines that Kenner put out, some of which are very much forgotten by today's collector, where we focus on the actual 92 Kenner figures, sort of ignoring or not counting anything that was put out by Kenner, but under a slightly different branding or aesthetic. Kind of like the Galactic Heroes that Hasbro did a few years ago, the little squishy figures that were also hung right next to the vintage line in aisle. So there is a place for different Star Wars figures for younger children, older children, and obviously the adult collector. But Ewoks didn't start with figures alone. No, in the mid-'80s, thanks to the new content between the movies and the animated series, you could pretty much get Ewok anything. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to talk to Wicket and pick up the magical Endor phone? And yeah, well, that's God, kids probably don't even know what a phone is anymore. But it was all there. You had plush, you had toys, you had lunchboxes, you had t-shirts and posters, and probably pogs as well, once the 90s hit. But yeah, it was all about the Ewoks. I don't even know what this is. Is this a statue? I don't know, I guess. Who needs a high-end statue that doesn't quite look like a screen-accurate Wicket? I guess somebody did, because they made it. I mean, it was everywhere. Play-Doh, art supplies, coloring books, comic books, you name it. So what was it, other than the fact that these were basically teddy bears in outer space that like to eat human beings, which, how that's aspirational for kids, I guess we try to forget about that. But yeah, strap one to a glider, give one of them a catapult, give them a battle wagon, and they could be both cuddly, fierce, and action-oriented. So it worked for both boys, girls, older, and younger. And Ewoks were set up to be so popular that they were actually 50-50 with Kenner, where half of their advertisement was the original action figure line, and the other 50% was Ewok merchandise after Return of the Jedi. Here's the reason why. The formula works. Cute, furry characters that live in trees and have innocent adventures in the woods is a proven formula. It has been used with tons of properties. It's not just that the Ewoks were kind of the last bastion of Star Wars storytelling before the brand went into hibernation till Power of the Force 2 in '95, but because it was a clinically proven formula, the spreadsheet said this works. That was a big reason why the Ewoks were so heavily bet on. A lot of us tend to forget that most toy lines lose money. And toy companies are prepared for this because you only need one or two to do well to make up for all of the sort of bombs. It's very much like theatrical movies. One major hit, like, say, Marvel Legends, for example, can make up for other brands not doing as well because they know that a powerhouse cash cow. Think of all the brands from the 80s and 90s that we don't even think about anymore. Isn't that funny? Think about the brands you don't think about. I don't know how you do that. But yeah, most brands, 9 out of 10 brands, fail. And that's a lot of tooling money and a lot of capital investment. So when you have a product that is Star Wars oriented, check, cute teddy bears, lives in the forest, have adventures, appeals to boys and girls, can be aged down to the more toy-buying population of younger children, it's a formula for success. And the spreadsheet says, make these toys. Now, they only work really to a degree. Yes, there were kids interested in more Ewok product, but it wasn't really a substitute for another Star Wars movie. Yeah, the Ewoks worked for that younger demographic, but for the older kids, they tended to see Ewoks as kind of down-aging and almost dumbing down Star Wars, and that's really where the, I guess, offense at Ewoks came from, and why there was so much hatred towards them, just because simply it was taking Star Wars and turning it into a spreadsheet property, pulling it down to a younger age. And for us who grew up with Star Wars and were older, well, keep calm and yub-nub. I hope this video was enlightening on why Ewoks were so popular and toy companies were so game to make everything Ewok in the mid-'80s. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Share this video. It's a huge help to the channel and most appreciated. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.